Who's got it better than us?
Nobody! Herbert is being chased, thrown on the run, and it is caught. Touchdown, Keenan Allen. What a great...
My goal is not to break you. My goal is to make you harder to break.
Comes back. Number 6.
Huge sack by Joey Bosa.
Touchdown! 90-yard touchdown!
Off at the 8-yard line by Derwin James. Sets his feet, takes a shot downfield, has Knighton. Caught! Touchdown! Chargers!
Boys, grab your lunch boxes and go attack this day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
Oh, the angels are singing. It feels like there should be music playing. Herbert's back on the practice field tearing it up, and you can hear a sigh of thank fuck from Chargers fans on every hemisphere of the globe. Oh, and how good does that rookie running back look? Welcome to the Thunder Down Under Chargers podcast. 3 Aussie lads here to talk smack about the questionable quarterback room behind Justin Herbert. I kid ya. We laid into him enough last week. We're just agonisingly gnawing our way through some mind-numbing preseason games before regular season kicks off. Andy Profit here, as always, alongside me, Jack Reed and Alistair Lloyd. Boys!
Howdy.
Let's break down the 13-9 loss to the Stetson Bennett-led Rams. Al, kick it off.
Well, trying to look off to one side, the fact that the Chargers have now gone 8 quarters without scoring a touchdown on offense. I mean... wow, it's hard to do this show each week when you look at that performance out there. But you were, like you said, mate, there are a few positive signs and things I think we can talk about tonight. But one thing that definitely stood out, Jack, is Easton Stick. We've got to start, I think, with Easton Stick. I know you said that last week you had him shoving chopsticks into your eyes. What did he have you doing this week?
Very much the same, but my local Chinese restaurant was all out of chopsticks, so it was just my fingers.
Okay.
Really unfortunate. I didn't really see any improvement whatsoever. We moved the ball a bit better, but that was mainly thanks to the running game. Some of the throws that he made, we talked offline a little bit about that throw to Brendan Rice over the middle. And that was relatively early on in the game. I watched that replay when it happened about 3 or 4 times. I just went, is Easton Stick actually throwing that with purpose? Or is he kind of just like, he sort of put it? And I'm not saying that was the reason why Brendan Rice dropped the ball, but it just didn't look confident whatsoever. And so I really question whether he's getting a playbook at the start of the game with going, hey, Easton, this is what we're running today. It's not the scheme that we're running in practice because we don't want to give anything away. But we seriously have to think about something unless miraculously something changes this week, because I would say it's on par with the performance he put in week 1, unfortunately. Poor guy. He's really struggling. And a minute 30 was his press conference, so that tells you quite a lot of what's going through in his mind.
For mine, I feel like he's regressed into a twig. You know, the offensive line, that starting offensive line was allowing him over 3 seconds of time to throw. And that one to Rice, it was a quad pump. There's just so much uncertainty. He's slow on his reads. He hesitates.
So slow.
His poor footwork exemplified in that, showing his numbers to the defense and just cannoning that ball over the middle for the interception.
Unbelievable throw.
It's a real concern. What is more concerning is that he averaged, and he's not playing a full 4 quarters of a game, but he was averaging 250 yards or thereabouts a game in the last 3 or 4 under Kellen Moore's arguably more complex offensive scheme. And now he's making Giro's baseline pass game look like he's performing blindfolded optical surgery. So I don't quite understand what's going on in between the ears. But
I think the most damning stat is, for me, PFF grades are split generally into when the quarterbacks kept clean and when they're under pressure. And his PFF grade, when kept clean, was 38.5 out of 100. Second week in a row that it's been below 40. And usually you see quarterbacks in the 70s and 80s when they're kept clean, because, that's when they operate. So terrible from him. Unacceptable to be bobbling a snap and stuffing up the exchange with the centre at the 1 yard line. He's played with Brendan Heimers all through the off-season with the twos. So he had a bad game. Jack, someone else who I thought had a bad game actually was our host. We were supposed to watch the game together on Sunday morning, and I've driven over to his place with 2 coffees for us, and I didn't want to let myself in, so I've gone to ring him. Nothing doing. Phone goes unanswered, so I drive myself home. Gets to halftime, he says, "Sorry, mate, I was awake, and then I was asleep." So who do you reckon had the worst performance, Jack? Both very experienced starters who are in really slow form to start the preseason.
Very, very experienced. It surprises me from Andy's perspective, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt of being a dad as well. So I'm going to side with him there. Now, Eastern Stick for mine needs to shape up or ship out. And I just get the feeling that Harbour is getting a little bit frustrated as well. The way that he speaks about it, he knows that he's going to cop it from the reporters, and he's just really tight-lipped about it. So it'll be fascinating to see. I mean, Perez, I don't think is much better either, but at least he has something. Or Stick is just going to run, and we're just going to see Stick run. But man, the guy can't throw a ball at the moment. So feel for him.
I'm glad I had the last 90 seconds to sit here and not say anything, because I felt as starstruck as Eastern Stick did in front of the press conference. That's probably some of your best gear, Al. And you know what? I'm not upset that I had to watch the game about 36 hours after it was cast, because that shit ain't worth getting out of bed for.
You picked a good one. It's very strategic of you, mate.
All right, so the real season.
We slapped Stick around last week. Unfortunately, he had just as poor a performance, so it calls into attention whether the team looks for another backup. That's a conversation for another day after roster breakdowns and cut day. Let's talk about some positives, because I thought there are a few. Maybe, Jack, do you want to start us off with one thing on the offense that you like the look of on the weekend?
Yes, and I think I said it very early in the piece. Again, Joe Alt is utterly ridiculous as a starting left tackle, right tackle, I should say, rookie. He even looked better than he did last week, which is what you'd expect. But Alistair, you remarked that his pad level for a guy that's 6'8" is quite staggering, and the way that he moves, the footwork that he produces. And he, even when he's pulling, he looks really crisp. He looks clean. He doesn't look like he knows where he's going, and he looks to make contact. So he just takes another step in my book. Played more snaps than he did in week 1 too, which shows me that he's up for the challenge. And it's just wonderful to see, because he and Slater looked like they're not even missing a beat. We've got anchors on the line for the first time that I can remember, which is wonderful.
It's just some remarkable flexion he has in his spine. I feel like it's something that's not taught. His ability just to bend his body. I guess you put it down to athleticism. It's unique. It's why he's a top 5 draft pick for an offensive tackle. Totally agree. He was solid. A couple of penalties. That's fine. Things for him to work on in the next few weeks. You mentioned him before, Andy. Kamani Vidal. I just thought he looked in his own tier compared to Patterson, who was all right, Spiller and Dotson. He's so decisive. His ability just to feel the hole, kind of lower his shoulder, push through. He had 3 first downs. He had a gain of 13. Very promising debut for the Chargers' new running back, I thought.
Absolutely loved the intent and the positivity that he brings towards his running game. I think PFF quite knocked the Chargers O-line for run blocking this week, but man, seeing a guy fight for yards and pick those holes and just go for it between the tackles, incredibly promising when you look at the Greg Roman running style of offense. So sorry to say it, Jack, but even though he caught a couple of balls, I think still has just eaten up some snaps at the moment. Jared Patterson, probably an outlier 4th running back if we go that way. Which, with injury history, I don't know if he's the type that might, clear waivers and wind up on the practice squad. But yeah, Kamani Vidal looked awesome. Really.
Well, let me ask this question back to you, Andy, before you go on Vidal. Is that clearly Spiller has just, Vidal's almost jumped him, you'd suggest. So Vidal would be running back 3, or Vidal, as they say. Spiller also had the second highest rated PFF grade of receiving, I know he only caught a couple, but we haven't seen any catches from Vidal. We haven't. Gus the Bus that's not really his game. Dobbins, is it his game? Maybe yes or no. But do you think they keep Spiller on the roster as that pass catching third down back with a bit of power? Do you think there's a spot for him, or is it just he's too much of a one trick pony?
To be a relatively one-dimensional running back and you're keeping him on for receptions out of the backfield, I don't know. That makes you quite predictable, I guess, when he's on the field, perhaps. I think J.K. Dobbins can sort of, I guess, out of Vidal, Dobbins and Edwards, Dobbins is probably the one able to receive. He's the faster of the guys. So I don't know. I think it's a real stretch. Like I said, there could very well be potential that the team does keep 4 running backs on the 53-man roster, in which case perhaps Spiller would get the nod over a Patterson. But at this stage, just for that alone, I find it kind of hard to sort of tip my hat to. So you do make a good point. When he caught the ball out of the off-field, there were a couple of spins in there and things like that. But it's two receptions. It's a pretty small sample space to be kind of giving that to when you've got depth at wide receiver, as we'll get into, depth at the cornerback position and safeties as well, where there's contributors to special teams that might sort of garner a little bit more of a well-rounded, deserving nod on that 53. Speaking of wide receivers, did we see any positives or any growth from Quentin Johnson? Because I saw some pretty crisp route running, made a nice catch. Look, if Easton Stick hadn't have blown the ball miles over his head, he did draw the illegal contact penalty, but he was catching it with his hands, not at his body. There's positives, there's small things, but getting out there, and then you've got guys like Simi Fehoko, who's just 52 yards, team high on the day, and just looked a lot better, using his frame and just a little bit more kind of guts to his performance. What do you guys think? What do you sort of see?
Dare I say it, that this could be the Lal effect. I need to look into my scientific notebook for that. Where's that? I can't find it anywhere. Sanjay Lal, my guy, the wide receivers coach. I thought QJ looked more explosive than he ever had before, and crisper, as you mentioned, Andy, when he was running routes. He looked purposeful too. Steps in the right direction, but are we just grasping for straws? This is a first-round pick, remember, from last year. And are we just, got our rose-coloured shades on, and should we actually be criticising him for not actually catching the ball for more yards? Understandable with the issues at quarterback. Before I pass to you, Alistair, and you might just shed some light on QJ, this Simi Fehoko guy is almost a tight end size. He's 6'4". Because I looked at him during the game going, God, he's big. And then I looked at 6'4", he's over 200 pounds. I go, wow. So, that's a matchup nightmare for teams. But what he's also doing, and I believe Harbaugh came out and said this, is he's a special teams gunner as well. He's playing really well on special teams and brings a lot there. So Fehoko is doing all the right things to make him that wide receiver 4 or 5. Alistair, what say you on this wide receiver depth?
On Fehoko first, I think he might have the inside track to making this roster at this stage because, arguably he's outperformed some of the rookies who were taken. Yep. Arguably he's outperformed Darius Davis. So, from 2 games, he's made each post a winner. It comes down to that philosophical question. Do you put more stock in who performs in the preseason games, or do you stick with those draft picks you made and say, look, we took Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson for a reason. We'll try to stash Fehoko on the practice squad. I'm not sure, but I've been impressed. Like you, he's a big guy. And if you've got a big guy you can use in the slot every now and then, I think that gives him a point of difference compared to a few of these other guys. On QJ, I'm not going to throw a shroud of darkness over the conversation, but you've never seen more people trying to make more from a double move penalty and a catch that he did not bring down in bounds. That is all I say. But I do completely agree that he looks way more impressive in terms of his confidence, the way he's moving, the routes. He beat press a few times when he wasn't targeted. And, according to Daniel Popper, his training camp has stood out for positive reasons this year. So I'm not going to have a go at him. I want him to succeed, and he does look better. Andy, let's talk about a couple of these guys we've sort of taken in this year's draft at wide receiver. Haven't really spoken about yet. First time we've seen McConkey. A bit more action for Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson. Talk to us about it, brother.
Loved seeing Lad McConkey out on the field. I was eager as if there's anything that you want to take from watching predominantly backups and fringe guys, it's seeing that guy that you're incredibly excited about, that key position lad. And there was some, I think, look, one catch for 5 yards. Looked like, I know, how's the sample space? But nice routes. What I really liked for a guy...
He looked good catching it, Andy. He looked crisp catching that 4-yard completion, and Stick put it on him too.
Yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It just depends on, what your preferred measurement is. But what I really liked out of Lad McConkey, is some of the blocking that he provided to his other receivers. There were a couple of kind of dump offs in the flat, and man, he's not a big guy, but he really just sort of gives it his all. And that's sort of one of those sort of intangible things that you don't get that often. It's just that heart and that gut. So I think there's a lot to build on. Obviously, I think the connection that we've heard and seen throughout training camp with Justin Herbert will really start to come into fruition. As for the other two guys, I think there was one notable drop from Cornelius Johnson. Brendan Rice has been a little bit unlucky, to be honest. There's been moments in that first week, but still hasn't hauled in an reception. So I don't know. It's tough, being the progeny of the greatest to ever do it at the position, but having sort of nothing on paper to show for it. It's hard to hang on to that. So I don't know. I think fingers crossed this week we see just one or two things. One catch for 5 yards, bit of pass blocking, whatever. He'll be my guy. But it's hard to say. We haven't had great sort of work coming to them from the quarterbacks, so it's a very small sample space. And you're right, guys. I think Luis Perez has had a bit of a connection with Fehoko as well. So he's been in the building a week and a half, and he's finding his groove and sees a guy open that he trusts. So it's hard to kind of break away from that for this other new guy who's actually looking like he's got a little bit more poise and a little bit more comfort and control under center. So yeah, we'll have to see. Will Disley in at tight end. Nice to see him. Don't know what Hayden Hurst's status is. Have they sewn him back together? But Donald Parham there as well. Stone Smart seems to be making a couple of plays. The tight end room remains to be a bit of a blur for mine.
Well, let's go to the most important room, and let's go to the big boys. All right. I've had my eye on these two guys now for 2 weeks, and I'm not too sure really where the depth chart is. It seems to be that some of these depth guys are really good in one aspect of the game, but then extremely poor in the other. Sorrell and Hymas seemingly pretty strong in true pass sets and pass protection, but really seem to struggle with Roman running concepts. Yet Leatherwood and Willis Patrick, which I'll talk about in a second, put in pretty consistent shifts for both. So it's really interesting starting to see the discrepancies in PFF grades, but also and using those PFF grades to then go back and look at the old 22. Obviously, PFF designer in gap versus zone. Gap concepts are designed to dictate the action, so the linemen don't have to think; they just go and do. Sorry, that's is that right? No, that's right.
Gap.
Yeah. Gap. Whereas zone asks the lineman to dictate the action. Zone concepts ask linemen to react, I should say. Sorry about that. Complete mistake from my bad notes.
Teacher.
Yeah, that's right.
Go on, teach.
But looking at who blocks well in a gap scheme, obviously Patrick with an 87, almost 90 PFF. Then it goes Alt, Leatherwood, Sorrell. Zone winners, Slater, Pipkins, Leatherwood, Alt. So I'm wondering who's going to take out these rotational offensive line spots. Are we going to go for pass blockers, or are we going to go for guys that can do and run Roman's pretty heavy run scheme? Leatherwood, weirdly enough, had a quite a complete improvement from last week. There was one flailing arm bull rush that got him, that he looked like a wacky waving inflatable arm flailing man. But other than that, I thought he was fairly consistent, given it was possibly the worst performance I've seen from an offensive lineman in week 1. Alistair, what say you in not only the big men, but also the running game?
First on Leatherwood, I think he might have been charting his own PFF grades, because I saw at least 4 snaps where he lost the rep. And I
saw 3. I saw 3.
1 in the running game, 3 in pass protection. So what, was it an improvement from last week? Yeah, sure. He allowed a bad pressure on stick that should have been a sack, and stick escaped it. He allowed the strip sack fumble of Perez. I don't think you can play him at tackle. I think there was a missed opportunity not to play him at guard this preseason. Just one kind of coaching critique from me. He showed that he can't play offensive tackle at Las Vegas. Then when he moved inside it to guard, he looked a bit better. I was a little surprised they haven't cross-trained him there during the preseason. Maybe in week 3, but I wouldn't be comfortable with him at tackle. I thought on the question of the running game, Jack, this week looked way better. We saw more traditional Greg Roman calls, more gap than zone. Last week, it was more zone than gap. And you saw some of those play calls with duo, with the 2 double blocks, guard tackle counter with the 2 on the right side, coming across, springing open Vidal. It looked good. Dare I say it, even Tucker Fisk as the fullback / tight end had some moments. We'll get into that discussion later, but he acquitted himself all right in his first game. I think the jury's still out, Andy. The jury's still out on Sorrell, Leatherwood, Willis Patrick. Who's going to make it as a 9th offensive lineman? Because I do think that they're going to go with Sawyer, Hymas, and McFadden as 6, 7, 8. And I think they're talking about who's this 9th. And it's pretty open, at least from my perspective. What did you say?
I thought, as we finished last show, I thought, God, you really can't talk about everyone who played, right? But watching Willis Patrick, and then, sometimes like you, Jack, you see the game and then you look at a PFF grade and you go, I completely agree with Al on the Leatherwood situation of someone just smashing in some numbers, maybe him. Willis Patrick,
I didn't think it was that bad, but yeah, okay. I agree to disagree.
Not great. Willis Patrick, I've really enjoyed watching the undrafted free agent, the Horned Frog, playing at guard. Whether we see that as like a, with the aforementioned McFadden, Jaimez, and maybe Sorrell's got a little bit of flex. Do we have enough kind of depth at tackle? Maybe that is the underlying factor as to who gets that 9th spot, but it would be disappointing. You said earlier a couple of penalties against Joe Alt. One was blatantly not Joe Alt. They miscalled it. It was Foster Sorrell, and you'd think a guy with a little bit of pro experience might not be coughing up false starts in bad positions. Hey, that's the Chargers offensive line of old, right? So, I'm not really thrilled with the idea of having Sorrell or Leatherwood, but I don't know what Willis Patrick's sort of ability would be playing at tackle. If that's sort of where it had to be. So
the thing is, though, let's just go through this. Okay, Slater goes down. Alt moves to left tackle. Pipkins moves to right tackle. Sawyer comes in at right guard. Okay, think of it. Alt goes down. Pipkins kicks out. Sawyer comes in. So we've actually got, with Pipkins playing in this guard spot, and listen, he only played 10 snaps, but he was out in some of those, what do you call them, Alistair? When the guard and the tackle pull across the back of the line, counter, looked pretty good there, and has been holding up, hasn't been a glaring hole. If Zion Johnson goes out, Sawyer comes in. There seems to be within that 6 personnel, that 7 personnel, there is enough sort of chopping and changing, which makes me think that, well, what are they going to value? They seem to me like they've got a lot of pass blockers because, you think you've got 3 tackles playing on the line. You've also got Solier, who's also played tackle and done a very good job. So are you going to go with bigger bodies to shore up that middle? Because we know that one of the worst things that Justin Herbert doesn't like is having that pressure up the middle. And I still worry that Johnson, Pipkins, and whoever starts at center, depending on injuries, is just not good enough. So it'll be fascinating to see that what kind of rotations in those deeper offensive line spots.
And then just to put a bow on the discussion, everything you just said made perfect sense to me, Jack. And for me would be why you'd really think seriously about Willis Patrick.
Correct.
Because he's got a great physique. He's broad. He's a guard-only player. Doesn't play any of the other positions. I think that makes sense. However, it looks like Foster Sorrell is actually playing guard with the ones this week, while others can't go. And the fact that they're playing him at left tackle, guard, right tackle, if I was asked to predict, it seems to me that they're going to go with him at the moment. Not necessarily what I would do. All right. That's 25 minutes on the offense. Let's flip to the defense, Andy. Start us off. Where are we going to go? Are we going to go good or are we going to go bad?
We started bad last time, so I think we go good. The three of us have talked offline about this a lot, and I think that's, for mine, over the last couple of years, a big concern before all the cornerback disasters went down, in the last sort of 12, 18 months, was just where this linebacker room was. And I think when you saw Perryman and Deion Henley starting that game together, both complementing each other beautifully in the run and coverage, awesome. The way that Deion Henley has, especially with the out of Nick Neiman, so Henley was kind of running the defense with the green dot. I thought he was great. He had pass breakup, pressures, got into coverage, had a PBU. Awesome. Perryman's just doing his veteran downhill thing, and it was just fantastic to see. Not such a standout game as we may have seen with Troy Dye, but newcomer Shaq Quarterman forced a fumble. Shane Lee gobbled that one up. There's input from a lot of guys. We'll get into a new signing, but Frank Jinder has come across, and we're just really building that room. Linebackers have really impressed me to start these first couple of weeks of the preseason. So good on them.
I was a little bit disturbed when I saw a player with the initials TT, because we've just gotten rid of a scourge on the organization with the initials of TT. And this time it wasn't Tom Telesco, but watching Tahir Tart in the middle of that line gets me excited. Belly, belly roll, belly, belly roll, belly roll. Give me men who are 320 pounds or ish, 6'3", who just want to eat hot dogs and tackle running backs. I absolutely loved his game. Highest run defender that we had on the field in the 80s. So you're talking someone who's elite. It seems to me, though, that the biggest blocker of Tart playing will be his motivation. At the moment, he's motivated because he wants to make the squad. He had some issues with motivation and not being picked and not being first option. Where has he come from? Tennessee, is that right?
Yeah. And
Miami. So it seems to me that Puna and Obonia have that 1 and 2 spots sort of locked up, I think. But that third man, even if he stays in the building, if he wants to, wonderful. Just another big body. And those are the prototypical guys that I like at nose tackle. So, yeah, good fun.
Thea, if you're listening, forget the Herbert jersey, man. Wait a few weeks. Wait for Tia Tart and ship that off to Hobart. Jack will wear it on the show. 100%. On that Tart signing, I think what that's done, interestingly, it gives us a guy who can play in a versatile way that at the moment, Jack, and you've called this, a Boyd B is not ready to do. He's injured at the minute, and he's a fourth-round rookie. Tart can play in the A gap. He can play in the B gap. That's really good because Puna, it looks like they're going to use him as a B gap player. When he got signed, I pointed out that and you did a great article, Jack, on Stormcloud, that his best snaps in the NFL have come in the A gap. His worst snaps have come in the B. Bit surprised to see that he's played all 17 snaps so far in the B gap, but he's played quite well. Bringing in Tart is another guy to fortify the defensive line, start to improve this run defense, which has been a problem for a long, long time. Totally agree. Defensive backs, pretty good. We've had a few different things. We see JT Woods being trialed at outside corner. I love the novel thinking. Clearly, he's drafted as a free safety, and Jim Harbaugh in his press conference said, "Well, he's long, he's fast, he's great in coverage. Why not play him outside corner?" And they played him there, and he wasn't targeted, and he had 1 tackle, so not bad. We saw Cam Hart play for the first time. We've seen combinations of Thomas Harper, Taheeb still in the slot. I'll come back to you on that one in a second, Jack, what you've seen from the 5th round rookie from Maryland. But maybe first, Andy, I'll tee you up here to talk a bit about number 33. That is Dean Leonard.
Made a seriously strong case for the cornerback 4 position, didn't he? Really... That game, look, wasn't perfect by any means. He gave up, I think, a 22-yard catch, 3 receptions on his 7 targets. Great pass breakup on the 2nd and goal on that fade. And then 2 plays later followed it up by, playing his zone perfectly and undercutting the route to snatch himself an end zone interception. Had the horse collar tackle. Like I said, not perfect, but he's really just come leaps and bounds and had a great off-season so far and is really sort of riding that wave. There was that, he was one of those late DB Staley guys along with Jasir Taylor. Obviously, Jasir's had a lot more exposure playing with his slot versatility, but Dean Leonard's really just sort of making himself known as a viable outside corner. And with Christian Fulton and Asante heading into free agency next year, it's not the worst sort of insurance policy to have. So good on him. That was a really great game to watch for where he excelled. So awesome. And we'll also say that the defense, reduced the missed tackles down from, I think, 15 last week to 8 this week. So that's stuff I like to see because along with passing, tackling so far, we're really sort of the bottom of the barrel. And they've been tackling in particular on defense has been that and run defense, which looks like it might be improving. Especially, I think you guys both missed the perfect opportunity of, perfect that Tart came right at the end like that sweet piece of cherry tart and just snatched himself up 2 tackles for loss. But hey, you guys don't have to be the funny ones. It was good. It was there was a fair few players. I didn't actually think that the edge group played that well. I thought that Tooley and Bud Dupree struggled to get pushed, struggled to set the edge.
Yeah, I don't think they were trying that hard somehow.
Good point.
So look, it was nice to see a couple of not surprising players or position groups stand up, but nice to see that if your go-to guys aren't playing, the kind of defense that Jesse Mint is creating is a real team-oriented one. Everyone picks up the pieces for one another. So that's starting to become a theme in this defense that I'm really enjoying to watch. While we're talking back onto the cornerbacks, and we've been pretty positive. You don't like to point out stinkers all that often, especially those guys who are vying for a practice squad spot. But Zamari Walton's got to have that 5 minutes back, doesn't he? Gave up the pass interference where he sort of just looked all over the shop, and then absolutely burnt by JJ Larp for that 47-yard touchdown.
I feel bad because he started that sequence with a PBU.
Yeah,
so clearly they've targeted him like 3 in a row, and he went PBU, DPI, and then 50-yard touchdown pretty soon after. So
obviously he hasn't been in Herbert's gym that often because he wasn't that hard to break. It took 2 goes before he crumbled mentally and then crumbled physically.
And you can imagine Sean McVay sitting. He's actually sitting in the offensive line because he goes, "That guy ruined his career now."
Yeah.
Pass at him. I can see him breaking. And you can just imagine him taking a lot of joy out of that. Alistair, you mentioned Taheeb still. The jury, for me, is still out on him. I do worry about his size and the sort of with his. If he's sort of out on island in Minter's system, I also didn't think he was particularly good on run defense either. And he's just, as I said, I do worry about his size. Listen, I think he can develop. He was targeted 3 times, allowed 2 receptions at about about 14 yards. So they're relatively big completions made on him. What's your read on Still? Happy? Not happy?
Can I just leave that one alone and say on the fence? Because
Okay.
he's a 5th round rookie who I will say this week's offense was harder to defend than last week's. For the Seahawks, they've got Ben Grubb. They play a spread offense. This week with the Rams, it's very much more the Shanahan style, which puts more strain on your slot corners because they use a lot more crossing patterns and boot action. So you saw, I agree with you, you saw a couple in run defense where he was late. He bit on a play fake, so then he had a bad angle and missed a tackle. I think he might have missed 2 from memory and allowed some runs. I will mention he did have one really nice pass breakup on a crossing route off play action. So I'm just seeing little signs that for a 5th round rookie, he doesn't look like he's completely out of his depth. That's what I think anyway. But nor do I think someone has grabbed that slot corner spot. No. Thomas Harper's looked okay, that undrafted free agent from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Jasir Taylor kind of looks like he's going to win the job by default based on training camp, but in the games, he hasn't, to me at least, Andy, stood out as being way better than the other 2.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like it is a bit of a sort of default setting to have that almost slot specialist from the past who at moments really didn't impress me last season playing in the slot. And you kind of gave it, you're like, second year, moving into the third, hopefully you see a step up. So interesting. Thomas Harper, yeah, definitely a guy. Interesting to see how many corners they elect to take, and also how many safeties as well, because we're getting some decent play. JT Woods is starting to step up now, and
JT Woods? Let's throw a question. Is JT Woods making this final 53? If we assume that Finley's going to make it, that we're going to go Derwin, Gilman, Finley, are they going to say, "Hey, look, he's versatile. You make the 53"?
It's interesting. I enjoyed your commentary offline after the game about playing JT Woods at outside corner and saying, "Hey, we've just got to exhaust all avenues before the guy's getting picked up off waivers in a few weeks' time." What do you think about Akeem Dent as a roughie?
I don't think he'll make it. Maybe he's a stash for the practice squad. I thought last week it was pretty poor. I didn't really notice him this week. I know he graded all right, so maybe that's a good thing. I haven't seen the all 22. Maybe he was in the right spot. I think overall, like just to kind of go, bigger picture, the defense still looks like they're all playing on the same. Like they all look connected and like they're a much improved unit from last year. Like even though noting the edge rushers didn't have a good week. Jack, maybe there was some kind of effort or they're running a vanilla scheme. But again, you've kept a team to kind of less than 2 scores or thereabouts. And you're seeing lots of guys who, don't forget, none of the starters are really playing. Good showing so far from Jesse Minter.
So that was my question that I was going to throw back to you, Alistair. Without seeing Derwin James in this scheme as of yet, is it hard to even pinpoint who's going to be playing the slot? I mean, I don't really see a prototypical slot anywhere on the roster, actually. I don't see a cornerback with the size, not only height-wise, but also physically. And I just don't see a person who's particularly good at it. Like if you're taking the Trent McDuffies and the Kyle Hamilton's a safety that can almost play everywhere as versatile. Trent McDuffie can almost play anywhere as well. I just feel is we don't really have anyone good enough at one position only, but yet we don't have anyone good enough that can kind of get away with playing across the defense. So
yeah, you need that hybrid of what Jasir brings and what Tahi brings. Jasir is a bigger corner. So in run defense, theoretically, that's good for in the slot because he's about 6 foot and closer to 200. But his hips are tight, and in coverage, he struggles to keep connected. Tahi Steele's the opposite, as you're saying, Jack. He's a bit lighter in the 180s, I think. And he's struggling to hold on to tackles, but he looks very fluid in coverage. So...
Is there a possibility where Derwin plays the slot? He's closer to the line, which means that he can be a strong side or weak side blitzers. But then someone like a Henley or a Coulson is able to pick up that tight end position a little more, especially Henley with the way that he was reading the passing game. And that's just a quick pass from Derwin to a linebacker. Who knows? I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, he seems to me at the moment, along with Mack and Bosa, who we know are going to be, cornerstones of the edge group, but Derwin being the linchpin in the middle of all of this? Or have too many, especially in the Staley scheme, has asked Derwin to try and do too much, to try and be everything to everyone, and he's actually not been good at anything, or not been elite, let's say. He's been very good. So, is it just a fact of, hey, Derwin, just go and play, just do your thing, play strong safety, you're in the box, you're out of the box, just have fun? What do you reckon? It's hard to tell.
I think it'll be matchup driven, basically.
Yeah.
I think there will be weeks where Derwin will play more than 50% of snaps in the slot. And it might be those weeks against Kansas City, for example. I also don't think it's the biggest problem in the world if you don't have a slot specialist who's the best in the league. It depends how much you want to play base defense versus nickel. I know majority of the time you're going to have 5 DBs on the field. But if you want, like you said, Jack, you can go 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 4 defensive backs, and put someone like a Henley or, dare I say it, Troy Dye as a weak side linebacker who can cover in the slot. I think schematically there are ways to cover that while you're still working out, is it Jasir, is it Tahib? And I think it's a reasonable problem to have.
It feels easier to cover having no slot corner than having an outside corner. Let's put it that way. And just on that last thing before I'm moving on, Andy, I always wonder the size of linebackers. Just watching the All-22 and the difference in body shape between Henley and Perryman was fascinating because I've actually never seen them almost side by side. Obviously, Perryman, he's a shorter, stouter player, but far out, Henley is like longer than I thought. Actually, he's quite long and sort of almost, he's taller than Perryman as well. So, and we haven't seen Coulson out there yet. So that's, you hit it on at the very start, Andy. That room is starting to all of a sudden, for the first time in however long, look very, very interesting and a lot of fun.
They look so good, those two. Perryman looked fantastic. I know that we did not like him when he left 6 years ago. He's now a really experienced linebacker, and he just reads his keys and goes and smacks you in the head. Boom! I only played the 10 snaps, 3 tackles, 2 run stops. Perfect return. Stay hydrated, everybody.
I'm really liking, we knew coming out or when he was drafted that Henley had the raw athletic ability, but what you're seeing now is that using that and that length and that range exactly to exceed in coverage. And there were flashes out there in the small sort of, however many snaps he had, not many, but where you just sort of saw that thing and it's great. And I'm glad you mentioned Junior Coulson because he's obviously was an integral part of Minter's defense at Michigan, and we haven't seen a whiff of him yet, so it's very exciting. Last thing I'll say, almost the worst thing about the botched snap on the goal line, of course, it would have been the Chargers' first touchdown of the preseason. But Scotty Matlock was lined up at the inside tight end.
Good pickup. Yeah.
And man, I got to say, if that had gone in, whether it had gone to the left side away from him, to see that big redhead do some kind of boogie would have been sweet. So, there's that sort of backup when you don't have the big man Jordan McFadden in the lineup. Maybe Scotty Matlock's the next go-to guy, or they're just throwing up some rare shit. But that would have been fun. I was really, as soon as I saw 99 in there, I went, oh, okay, let's go. Darling, can you take the baby? I need to watch this. Yeah, it's good stuff. All right. Let's move along to week 3. The last of the preseason.
Wait, before you do, I thought, he's about to call a timeout.
Sorry.
He's going to call a timeout. Set him up.
Forgot.
Set him up, Andy. Set him up.
Well, he wouldn't be named anything other than the Teach if he didn't have a teachable moment. So we welcome the teachable moment for the first time in 2024.
It's back, baby. It's back. Okay, class. This week, I want to highlight a lesson we can all take from Vidal's performance on the field. Vidal showcased a powerful, almost relentless style of running. Think bowling ball with a mission. What stood out was his vision and the ability to lower his pads and push the pile forward, gaining those crucial extra yards after contact. And he had some help from his friends too on the offensive line. The teachable moment here is about persistence and leveraging your strengths. Vidal didn't rely on fancy footwork or evasion to make his mark. Instead, he embraced his physicality, staying low and driving forward even when faced with resistance. This approach is a perfect metaphor for handling challenges in our own lives, I think. Sometimes you're not going to outmaneuver the obstacles in front of you, but if you stay grounded, focus on your strengths, and push through with determination, you can make progress. For anyone facing a tough situation, remember Kamani Vidal's run. Stay low, keep your eyes on the goal, and push through with everything you have got. It's not always about how you start, but how you finish. And sometimes those extra yards after contact are the ones that matter most. Class dismissed.
We need the Buddhist gong or something, just with that lovely bit of Confucian, maybe, philosophy. And that's just a lesson for you too, Andy. You've always got a chance to redeem yourself. Next week, there's another preseason game to watch together. On to week 3.
I know I'll be awake at 6 a.m. local time. Will you?
Ooh, it's a very good comeback.
Okay, if I may, once class is dismissed, we're off to lunch. We're heading into week 3 of the preseason, the team's first game away from SoFi as we head to AT&T Stadium to play against the Dallas Cowboys. As we've mentioned furiously throughout the show so far, Justin Herbert has successfully completed 2 days of practice in a row after the plantar fascia ailment, and all reports is that he is on fire. Never left mentally, now he's back physically.
Hot.
A huge sigh of relief for not only us, as I said earlier, but evidently coaches Harbaugh and Roman. And it was nice. It was nice to see Jim Harbaugh in his press conference make some kind of, I guess, injury-related comment to a question. And Greg Roman's sense of humor is about as secretive as his offensive play calling at the minute. Thank you, Al, for that one.
Hank, stick.
As I said, the Chargers have brought in linebacker Frank Ginder. Sure, first go I've buggered that up, but at least I said it the same way twice. Jack, if we can fucking
I believe it's Gina with a silent D, actually.
Oh, that's good gear.
Anyway.
He played in from 2022 to last season for the Michigan Panthers in the UFL. Fun fact, in the USFL in 2023, he was the Defensive Player of the Year. So he adds a little bit of physicality and depth to, as we've discussed, a pretty foolish linebacker room. Potentially, maybe another camp body or...
special teamer.
Yeah, but in the wake of the Nick Neiman injury, which we don't know, we're not available to provide any information on that. Who knows what the go is there, but yeah, seems like a physical unit. I think he's had 3 kind of off seasons with Atlanta, the Panthers and the Cardinals, I think off the top of my head. And we've re-signed UDFA Jalen Phillips. Out goes wide receiver Leon Johnson and quarterback Max Duggan, which is just fuel for the fire for all Chargers fans going, what a waste of a pick that was. Yada, yada, yada. Well, put it to rest. He's gone. He's out the window. So there you have it. I think personally it's an opportunity for our defense to continue to grow the snowball that is rolling. They're really feeling themselves at the moment. They're coming up against Trey Lance, who he did have a tidy outing in the 27-13 win over the Raiders. Up and down performances from the receivers from what I saw. 3 starting Jalen's, really 3 Jalen's starting on wide receivers. Ludicrous. Failed to make much of a mark. But this is my favourite one. Racy McMath, who I could have mistook on paper for a teacher-based porn star, seemed quite the handful. Interested to see if the pressure from all areas... the pressure from all areas approach of Jesse Minter is able to contain the dual threat nature of Lance, who rushed a little bit, scored a touchdown with his legs. On offense, well, Harbaugh swiftly quashed any sentiment of switching up the QB1 role for the Dallas game. Stick will start. I guess after what I suggested last week, that maybe Luis Perez start the game, play against a little bit tougher opposition. We gave it to Stick. He made the numbers look pretty. He didn't make us feel any better. What would you guys do differently heading into week 3? Let's start with let's keep this pretty brief. Start off the quarterback position. What are we doing?
Before I do that, I just think the repartee between Harbaugh and his name just popped out of my head. Who's the journalist? Popper. Sorry,
Popper,
there we go.
Popper.
Popped out of my head. There we go. Popped back in. So he just keeps asking. So he's changed from who's injured, and obviously Harbaugh goes, "Oh, he's just working through something," and Popper keeps going, "So is he a chance to make the roster?" It's like, it's just the best players make the roster. Oh, okay. What about your depth at the offensive line? It'll be the best players. The best players. And I think he said that over and over and over and over. Unbelievable.
He's got this longer spiel, like, how do you know it's the best players? They play the best. How do you know it makes the 53? They're the best players. He's given that spiel 3 times in 3 presses. The guy's like clockwork, man. Enthusiasm unknown to mankind.
So I will go. So what I'm going to be looking for in this Dallas game is I hope that the offensive line takes another step. I hope we see a little bit more pulling and a little bit more excitement in terms of getting physical. Also seeing if I'll bang the drum for Isaiah Spiller again. If he can actually get some good run
do it while you can
to see his power, I know. And obviously Vidal, but what I don't want is Vidal to hurt himself, because I think he's now definitely the number 3. Very happy to not see Perryman or Henley again. Maybe Henley early on, just get some more snaps. Perryman, I don't need to see any more of. That's fine.
Great.
And let's just see what's happening in this cornerback room. What say you, Al?
Yeah, agree. I won't talk about the quarterbacks because I think maybe the backup quarterback's not on the roster at the moment.
Thank
we'll
you.
wait to see what happens after cuts, potentially. But Stick, you get one more chance. I think because the final 53 must be settled by next Tuesday, the 27th of August, so 2 days after the game, essentially, I'm interested in those, like, who are those guys who can be 49 to 53 on the roster? And I still think there are a couple of battles here. I'm looking at the wide receivers because you've got Brendan Rice, Cornelius Johnson, Simi Fehoko. I'm looking there. I'm looking at the DBs, JT Woods, Dean Leonard. Can you land a spot and make it? Is Cam Hart just going to automatically make it? Probably. So, you're only keeping probably 7 or 8 DBs. Someone's going to miss out. Who's it going to be? We'll find out. And then we've already talked about the 9th offensive line spot. Leatherwood, Willis Patrick, Foster Sorrell. There where I'm looking at. And then, boys, finally, we can talk about real football against the Raiders. Only one more week of this shit, and then it's the real stuff, Andy.
Yeah, and I can't wait because I can't sit through this. Like, we didn't talk about special teams because we're going to be talking about them. We're going to be talking about them consistently with how consistent Dick of the Kicker is. Oh, so good. I was going to ask you guys a ludicrous hypothetical, but I don't even want to go in there about someone catching touchdowns and him missing field goals. And I hope that the catching touchdowns is greater than of QJ is missing field goals this year. But there's a couple of guys coming back from injury. I wouldn't mind seeing Junior Colson having a run if he's healthy to do so. Jamari Salyer getting a couple of snaps under his belt, returning from a little bit of injury as well. But yeah, last question I had was, do you think that the quarterback 2 for the 2024 is on the roster? So we'll leave that one. We'll put it to bed. We've still got, between the 3 of us, to go through the rest. It's been feels like quite a rushed off season, even though we've had the better part of 6 or 7 months to do it. We've still got the Cardinals, the New England Patriots, and the Titans to chat about and get through. We might do a little collab if we can work it out with a couple of our international friends of the show. But other than that, guys, thanks for tuning in. One more week of bullshit football, and then we can get stuck into the real juicy boigers. So until then, take it easy, guys. Look after yourselves. We'll see you next time on the Thunder Down Under.
See you later, Governor. Bye-bye.
Backpedals looking, firing. He's got Floyd turning. Got it! Zigzag, 10, 5, high step, touchdown! San Diego!
Woo! Good Good night! Good night to all!